much for joining us today, and my fellow panelists. My name's Vic. I run a business called DataHawks, and DataHawks was founded basically due to my frustration at how marketing's just not really taken that seriously, unfortunately, in hospitality, and I got really, really frustrated, so I wanted to sort of like provide marketers with a kind of insights that could help them drive real success. I think we live in the era of personalisation, and that means that to be a customer business in 2022 and beyond means that we need to be a data business. And that's why I am delighted to be joined by this panel of amazing humans who I'm going to ask to introduce themselves in a second. And we're going to have a good old chat about data. Okay? Do you want to start?
Sure. My name's Hannah Berry. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications for Corbin & King Restaurant Group.
Hi there. Oh, there we go. Hi, my name is Mark Smith. I am the founder and director of Double Up Social, where we do primarily social media marketing and content creation for food and beverage.
Hi everyone, my name is Danilo Mangano. I'm the managing director for the international business at SevenRooms, which is a guest data-driven hospitality platform for restaurants.
Amazing, thank you so much. I think that we all subscribe, we've chatted before, we all subscribe to the idea that when you can get ownership of your data, you can do some pretty incredible things, particularly from a marketing perspective, because we're all really closely connected with marketing. But what data should we be gathering? Danilo?
Sorry. Yeah, I think the key for any restaurant operator is to be able to collect data across the entire journey, customer journey. So it's very important, and especially in a post-COVID world, we all hope that we are moving into a post-COVID world. Either we have to live with this or completely move away, but it's very important to make sure that across that journey, operators can really collect the data on and off premise. We, of course, experienced the big increase in online ordering for the restaurant industry, and that was a great way to collect data for operators. And we know that operators that were doing that before COVID, they found themselves ahead of the game when COVID hit, and online ordering became, in many cases, the only revenue stream. So the focus for any operator has to be to make sure that the data they collect is across the entire journey. So before the customer arrives at the venue, whether they interact through an online order or when they are at the venue, how the operator can collect data to really personalize the experience and make that experience extra special, regardless that is a new or an existing customer. So it's really, really key that focus stays across the journey, and then it's also very important when you collect that data, how you can act and action that data, and what you can do when the guest leaves the venue to re-engage or stay engaged with that guest and drive repeat visits and repeat spend for your business. So if the operator does a good job in collecting that data throughout the journey, is definitely ahead of the game, and there are, of course, technologies that allow us to do that throughout the journey.
And Mark, I mean, from your perspective, running a social agency, what's the best kind of data, or what should that data have to enable operators and marketers to make it really actionable, but also really measurable?
Yeah, so I think the one bit of data that kind of connects the entire puzzle would be email and kind of phone numbers. Because I think if you're, no matter whether signing up to free Wi-Fi in a restaurant, or signing up to a newsletter or a loyalty card or a loyalty scheme, email address is kind of that one bit of data that kind of works across everything. And I think it's kind of really important that, to say you've got a loyalty scheme, you can then promote to people on the loyalty card, also then sending them emails, kind of having different touch points, also on Facebook and Instagram. If you've got marketing consent, you can then upload that kind of email database that you have to these other platforms and retarget them there as well. So I think email, and obviously phone number, but email primarily is that kind of one key bit of data that's kind of really, really important, and it kind of allows you to have multiple touch points across different kind of platforms.
Do you think people are reluctant to leave their email address, or do you think that it's not a hassle? Because when I talk to a lot of operators, they seem really worried about asking people for data.
Yeah, so I think people are kind of ready to give up email addresses. I think phone numbers, especially in the UK, people are less so because they don't want to get phone called randomly out of the blue. There's some statistics saying people would rather do like an IM chat rather than like a phone line service. So I think people are fine with kind of email addresses on the most part, but it really depends on the brand. I think obviously for hospitality, people are probably more likely to give up their name and their date of birth because they might be expecting to get, birthday discounts, that kind of thing. But I think email addresses is kind of a more acceptable bit of data.
Yeah, certainly, and probably giving them an incentive to share it as well.
Yeah.
Hannah,
Definitely.
we were talking earlier on, and you're doing an incredible job at this at Corbin and King. How are your marketing teams and your operators sort of joining forces to make sure you're collecting data at every point? How's that working?
Well, we're lucky in that we have a full CRM system, a customer relationship management system. So our data is all now, which we built in lockdown 1, is all linking in. So automatically our data feeds in from every collection point that we can possibly have. So SevenRooms is our biggest driver, and obviously SevenRooms, for me as a marketeer, was a big disruptor. It was the first reservation platform I was aware of that enabled a restaurant to own their own data and said that was important. So SevenRooms goes in, our guest Wi-Fi, as Mark said, goes into the CRM. Our till data, we're in the process of upgrading all our EPOS systems, that feeds in. Our gift voucher system feeds in. Even our ticketing for our cabaret venue feeds in. So the whole lot goes up. What our operators are quite good at is utilising the SevenRooms platform, that's what we have, to take those notes. So our data, yes, is the email and all of that, but we're trying to get much more granular. So all the tags from SevenRoom also feed into our CRM, which means we can then create a segment of guests that we know are vegetarians, and then not send them a meat steak image, for instance, that kind of thing. So yeah, the data is really important. I think people have to trust the brand to give their email, and as long as you're not bombarding them and you're doing the right volume and frequency for your brand, then hopefully your data just continues to grow.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, we're both from an operational background, so we know that there's sometimes a bit of a divide between operations and marketing, and it's kind of hard to believe that we're all actually trying to do the same thing and just look after people and drive our businesses. From the perspective of a platform like yours, Danilo, how does it work for operators and marketers? Because obviously we're going to think from a marketing perspective because we're now marketers, but this data can benefit operations and marketing, can't it?
Absolutely. And the perfect example is where the operator can use the data to personalize the experience across any venue, part of a group, or for an independent restaurant. So collecting that data allows the operator to know what the preferences for the customers are, like any dietary restriction, for example, or what is their favorite wine, what is their favorite drink, and that really personalizes that experience, especially when it comes to, for example, restaurant groups. You might be a regular at one venue, and this is the perfect example that Corbin and King sees. Maybe they have a very loyal customer that goes to the Wolseley, and then at some point they go to another venue, part of the group, maybe Brasserie Zedel, and the team at Brasserie Zedel never saw that customer. So through the data that they have in the system, they can really personalize that experience and make sure that that guest feels at home, like every time that he goes at the Wolseley. So that from an operational perspective. Another aspect could be the spend data that we provide operators with, where you can really see in real time whether that guest is an important guest for you, or even if you don't have data about that customer, you can go into the system and see that that table is spending quite a lot of money. So maybe your general manager can go there, touch that table, and try to get information about that guest. So that is another perfect example during service. From a marketing perspective, of course, that data can be actioned in many ways, in sending, again, personalized messages to really stay engaged with those customers and make sure that they hear all the latest news about what's going on at the restaurant, what's coming, whether there is any specific events or specific offers, depending on what the marketing strategy for the brand is.
Yeah, it all makes, perfect sense. I think we're probably all really aware, and I'm really, really conscious that there's two things that kind of play on my mind. The first thing is that I'm probably not particularly close to my customers anymore because, you know, I'm a 47-year-old trying to sell things to like 20-year-olds. So I'm really far away from them. And also, I think there's been a lot of talk about how things have changed post-COVID, but actually this industry had changed massively long before COVID had happened, you know, and we're dealing with a completely new sort of customer base. How do you think we can use the data that's sort of coming through a system like yours to help navigate those changes and work out what it is that people want, because we're so far away from it?
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to one of the points that I mentioned earlier, operators that were focused on data right before COVID, because we know COVID accelerated, of course, the importance of guest data. And this is an industry, the restaurant industry probably came last across the hospitality industry in understanding and identifying the importance of guest data. Because if we look at hotels, for example, they got there many years ago. So restaurants are catching up, but before COVID, operators that were focusing on guest data found themselves ahead of the game when COVID hit. And again, Hannah is here, so I'm mentioning again Corbin and King, but the big business and revenue stream that at-home deliveries represented for the group during COVID was definitely demonstrating that. So there is, yes, a very huge increase in the importance of collecting the data and, as we said, across the entire journey to then make sure that across different experiences or different interactions that the guests will have with the brand, you can use that data. So
I feel like SevenRooms and Corbin and King are like, you know, a match made in heaven. Like, I love what's going on here. Hannah, what's been your own data journey, both in response to just the fact that the world is changing, and we've been through probably one of the biggest sort of cultural and technological and societal shifts in a really long time, but also, you know, post-COVID. I mean, what's been your own journey?
Our journey, as I sort of just said, we'd already planned to put in a new CRM system, and we'd just signed the contract actually as we went into lockdown. So we were able to build it in lockdown 1. So we already had the email data, but we didn't have the kind of one customer view platform that we now have now. So that was really great for our team because lockdown 1 was super productive, and we probably got it up and running quicker than we would have been if we'd been doing all our normal day-to-day as well. But I think in terms of the industry, I agree with Danilo. I think restaurants or hospitality in general as a sector has been slower than, say, a retail sector to adopt social media first of all, and now data, and to use it effectively. So I think the pandemic shifted the focus of it, and the acceleration of both our internal teams and our customers adopted it. So I think 2 things played a part in that. Delivery for sure. You know, everyone did a takeaway or a finish at home or something, and you needed a way to tell your customers about that, and you weren't in the restaurant. So social media, email marketing really came into play. But also I think technology-wise, the QR code adoption, you know, because of track and trace, so many people, you know, I thought QR codes had died a death years and years ago, but it came back with a vengeance. So customers got really used to scanning QR codes, which we're now rolling out a pay at table solution, which is QR code driven, and our customers are already super used to using that technology that I don't think pre-COVID they would have been. I think for us as a company as well, I've been at the company 3 years, and I think social media when I joined was seen as a sort of brand enhancer, but not particularly important. Yes, we need it, a bit of a necessary evil, if you will. And we've been able to massively increase the frequency that we post, the type of content that we post, also doing a lot of recruitment marketing, which I'd never done because obviously the industry is suffering massively with trying to get staff. So we've tried to focus on a lot of what makes our company special and our cultural and our people, and featuring that more on social. So that's sort of also played a part in how we've changed our strategy. But I think just internally, we've got a lot of people who've been at the company a very long time and are a bit older, and seeing how they've adopted this sort of new way, and also being able to actually show, no, it's not just brand enhancement. We actually drove sales, we drove conversions and business, has been really helpful. As Vic said at the beginning, marketing's not always taken seriously, and I definitely feel that has really shifted, which is, as a marketer, is quite rewarding. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And picking up what you were just talking about social as well. I mean, Mark, you are really close to people, aren't you? You're like literally digging into what everybody did last night on social. So
yeah, exactly.
What,
for better or for worse.
Yeah, I mean, terrifying, but also amazing. I mean, what have been the big changes that you've seen just from a perspective of the sort of data that you're gathering through your social platforms and accounts, and how have things changed over the last couple of years, both as a result of COVID, but also just because, you know, life is changing?
Yeah, I would say that for social media in general, things are getting a lot kind of faster and more efficient. So rather than, for example, posting on feeds as much, people are posting on stories and reels. This kind of more, I think that's kind of, it was accelerated by COVID and kind of living in the now. So rather than, you know, taking a photo, writing a caption, hashtags, adding filters, people are much more interested in just taking a photo and uploading it in the there and then. And I think that's kind of more of a struggle for hospitality brands, because it means that where as a brand you could go on and say, all right, we've got all this customer imagery, all this UGC from a couple of months ago that we can use, whereas brands are now having to look for use of stories, which, you know, they go after 24 hours. Brands have to be a lot more reactive in seeing how customers are talking about them on social media. They can't just go back and see a big image bank of how, you know, they've been tagged and stuff. They have to be much more reactive in it. And I think especially kind of with COVID, obviously with social media platforms, there's been lots of scandals and stuff down the past in the history, but I think kind of the fear and the kind of cynicism that COVID brought on, I think that's very much kind of translated into social media. So Facebook, for example, they saw, I think like the first time in their history, they saw a decreased amount of sign-ups, for example. So I think people should be not looking at one social media platform, you know, religiously, but looking at, you know, for example, other growing platforms like TikTok and that kind of thing as well.
So just on the social thing, just picking up on something you said earlier on, so we've talked a lot about how you can kind of convert your existing customers. So how can we drive frequency or spend? How do we just, and I know you mentioned this sort of briefly earlier on, but how do we use all of this incredible data to find new people? And you know, whether that's in existing sites or whether it's about sort of thinking about open new sites, because people are back on the opening trail again.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, for existing customers, one thing that we always kind of recommend for brands is when they've got like a newsletter or something on their website is have like a closest store or a favorite venue kind of drop down so people can select where their closest venue is. And obviously that means when you're targeting people and when you're doing campaigns like we're saying about personalization, you can, rather than doing one big blanket campaign, you can target by venue. But I think obviously using Facebook ads, you know, you can target by area, you can target by location, gender, interest, that kind of thing. I think is really important, and I think opening up new venues, I think running those kind of paid ads is something that's really, really important, because often you can target by location, you can target by, you know, 5 miles of your venue, you can target by the age you want to try and advertise to, and more importantly, the kind of the interest targeting, because that's a data that Facebook has and Instagram has that's really, really quite scary, you know, the amount of kind of interest targeting they have on us. But if you're opening up like an American restaurant in Greenwich, you can target people who are interested in burgers, interested in hot dogs, interested in French fries. So you can make sure that the return on ad spend you get is kind of quite high, because you can do kind of that quite in-depth targeting.
I joined a group about 15 years ago, liking roast dinners, and I don't even eat meat, so I don't even know why I did that. So good luck trying to find lookalikes of me.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, Danilo, we were talking with Bianca, who works with you, about this thing you said about your business is, your intention is to make the small big and the big small, and I really love that. I mean, what does that mean to you? What does that mean to everybody else?
Yeah, absolutely. That is the core of our philosophy and our approach for the restaurant industry, and make basically the big small and the small big. So let's start from the small big. We focus on across the entire industry, and we work with independent restaurants. So the objective there is to make sure that they can do something leveraging our technology that doesn't necessarily require additional accounts. And even more so these days, as we know, staff shortage is a big issue for the industry. So through some of our features, like the marketing automation, for example, they can really interact directly on a personalized level with their guests. So it's the ability to really make the small big for an independent operator that maybe doesn't have the resources or doesn't have a team or a structured team to look after marketing, look after reviews, look after many aspects of the interaction with the guests. When it comes to more structured operators, and we can talk here about operators that have 5 venues, 10 venues, or 1,000 venues, because we work with so many different groups is the ability to being able to deliver that personalized experience across the entire group. And again, leveraging that data that the platform provides them with and making sure that everywhere a guest goes always gets the same level of personalization. It feels at home, and the operator will really deliver on the promise on the brand. It operates on different levels depending on the size of the customer, but that is really our philosophy to ensure that all operators can deliver on that promise.
So probably in the audience there'll be people that are from, individual sites, and there'll probably be people that are from huge companies. So from a social perspective, Mark, how do we make the small big and the big small? Because that's what we're all trying to do, I guess.
Yeah, so I think making the big small, I think that's kind of like you were saying, more focused on the personalization and the kind of the approachability of the brands. So where you might have massive brands, Coca-Cola for example, they might be seen as more like a faceless entity. So I think making the big small on social is more about increasing that approachability. So replying to messages, comments, being responsive. Whereas, and I think that's kind of more of a day-to-day organic side. Whereas making the small big, I think that's kind of where more of the paid side comes in. And I think obviously that's kind of all about making your brand look more credible. So obviously it's similar to if you walk by a restaurant and it was empty, you might be less likely to go in versus if it was packed. And I think same with social media. If you see an account that has, or a brand that doesn't have much traction, much engagement, much following, it doesn't kind of paint the brand in the best light. So by using paid ads, they can obviously make their brand seem bigger, more attractive to customers, similar to kind of franchise businesses, which we work a lot with. They want to make the brand seem quite attractive to franchisees as well. So essentially by making them seem bigger than they are kind of helps kind of from that kind of credibility point of view.
And Hannah, you work for an iconic business, so how do you take that iconic business that everybody has heard of, but then apply it also to a service model that is probably based on like absolute one-to-one interaction?
I think, excuse me, I think our operators are really, really good at that. We're lucky to have some amazing maitre d's and reception teams. And although they've got the knowledge in their heads, as Danilo said earlier, they very much use the system to input that knowledge. I also like the photograph function that SevenRooms have. So if we have a lot of regular guests, and that photo function means that a new person on the reception team will know who to look out for already, and even if it's in a different restaurant. I think in comms-wise, although we're a reasonably large group, our restaurants are all, we think of them all as very individual. So when we send our comms, they're very personalised. They either come from the general manager talking to the one person that is receiving it, or occasionally we send comms, which we did actually a lot in lockdown, from our CEO Jeremy King. So he tends to talk more for the group, or if it's something, lots of things recently, but if it's something that's more appropriate to come from him, we'll write the email from him. But otherwise the marketing of it is very personalised from a general manager who people know and see, and we see obviously our data and stats in terms of open rates, but anecdotally the GMs also feed back to us on how many people actually replied to them personally or came in and said, oh, we loved your last newsletter. So it's kind of nice because they still feel like small independents, even though it is, yes, quite a big group now.
So thinking about what Hannah's managed to achieve, Corbin and King, how could a QSR or a big casual brand translate that kind of personal, I guess it is really personal and one-to-one sort of communication? How can they do that through paid and organic social?
Yeah, so I think no matter whether you're kind of a bigger, more luxury brand all the way down to casual brands, the people want the same thing, they want that kind of relatability and obviously the personalization. And I think that obviously from a content point of view, people still want to see the same thing. People still want to see the sourcing, they want to meet the team, they want to see the behind the scenes. So that is the same across essentially the whole industry. So I think it's kind of really important to make sure that the brand looks authentic. But obviously where kind of the marketing differs there, obviously for a lot of kind of higher value venues, people will be more social with it, they'll obviously go for celebrations, whereas more casual and quick service brands, it might be more routine based. So they might go to a coffee shop every morning, or they might get a takeaway every Friday. So I think it's important to kind of lean into that marketing, so that where if someone hasn't visited in a couple of weeks, they get sent an email saying we haven't seen you, or obviously where quick service and casual brands, they're more likely to set up loyalty schemes, for example, and offer discounts. So it's obviously really making sure that you understand your audience and kind of and tailor your offers around it, really.
And Danilo, your system is kind of perfectly set up for this as well, just from an operational perspective, because if I'm going into a restaurant and somebody recognises me and it's my local restaurant, then, you know, that's one thing. But if I'm going into a big business where there's lots of restaurants, I mean, how can your system help deliver that level of personalisation where I feel like I'm really being talked to by the owner here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the principle remains the same, is the interaction with the guest that changes when it comes to QSR or more fast casual restaurants. So it goes back to the importance on owning the guest data because you still want to offer something personalized or special, even if the customer, for example, doesn't sit in your restaurant because they only order online. But it's important for you to know your guests so that you can almost get ahead of what they are looking to order. So the importance of getting that data, regardless of the interaction, the type of interaction that you will have with your guests remains key. And going back to Mark's point earlier, the direct channels and social media channels are playing a big role there. So we saw a huge increase in collecting data through those channels, and it's all about booking direct, of course, and owning that data to then offer something special. For a QSR brand, could be an offer, could be putting in front of them to drive additional spend, the items that they like, the items that they ordered before. And then for brands that focused on online ordering maybe during COVID, and now they want to convert those guests into a dining guest, they can leverage again the data and send them a promotional message to try and convert those guests and invite them in. So owning the data remains key. Direct channels remain the best way to engage with your guests and understand them. And that has to be top of mind for any operators in our mind. And this is the core and the philosophy of everything we do across that end-to-end customer journey that I mentioned earlier.
I mean, you've sold it to me. It all sounds completely legit to me. I mean, we said at the start that to be a customer business, you have to be a data business. But we know that lots of marketers and lots of operators, you know, are in hospitality, as we all are, because it's a people business and we love all of that. I mean, if people are worried about losing the heart and soul, let's say, of marketing, what would you say to them, Hannah?
It's something I very much had to pitch when I joined Corbin & King. My boss had given me a kind of KPI of installing a CRM system, but I had to present and pitch that to our board. And with if you know our company, it's I would say quite traditional, quite classic company that had never really done very much marketing. And the way I sold that is that we're really, really good on the floor at giving that individual service of knowing that, you know, Mr. Brown likes table 50 and he likes his eggs well done or whatever it is. And obviously we use that data so that everybody knows that. But what we had historically only ever done in marketing was, you know, we had this personalized experience on the floor, and then we did the same comms to everybody on a regularish basis. And what the CRM is giving us, and we're still very much on our journey of that, is the ability to make our marketing comms much more personalized and much more tailored, exactly as they do on the floor, so that the two things are much more hand in hand. And I think I also wanted to do much more storytelling with the marketing, and that is key for us having good relationships with all our ops teams. So we regularly meet with our GMs and our chefs. I mean, one thing we have coming up, it's a smaller story. It's for a brand that was for the Wolsey, so we don't do many creative things for that because it doesn't need it. But we found out from the chefs that actually the Battenberg on our afternoon tea menu takes 3 days to make. It's this whole amazing process. So we're going to do a whole load of content around that, sort of launching roughly Jubilee time when tea and Britishness will be talked about. But we're not doing a gimmick. We're just telling the story and making the marketing as personal as the services on the floor. So I think rather than it being two separate things, I think genuinely everyone now thinks of it as much more cohesive and much more that the marketing complements and echoes and amplifies exactly what the product and the services we offer on the floor, which I think I think the disparity is becoming less. And as I say, we're still on our journey, so there's lots we've got planned this year in terms of what we can now do with the data that we've got in CRM to segment, to use even different, within that system, we can serve younger people the same story as a social media post that Mark was saying, and they might not ever get the email, or, you know, that's definitely where we want to progress it to. But yeah, it's definitely, hopefully still, and as I say, the personal tone helps it, but the heart and the emotion of the floor has to be prevalent in the marketing as well, I think.
Yeah, thank you. And Mark, from your perspective, surely this is an exercise in using the data to kind of help you know which direction to go in, and then bringing it to life with all of the creativity and innovation that this industry is just legendary at.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so one thing that is kind of vital for us when we're doing marketing campaigns is kind of looking at referral data. So if you're running a campaign across social, across, you know, web, across PR, or email, looking at referral data to see where your traffic has come from, where your traffic to booking and reservation pages has come from. I think it's vital to see. But obviously, going back to your point about obviously human connection and data, I don't think obviously there's no reason why it can't coexist. As has been mentioned, obviously making sure people and staff are aware of allergies and stuff before people go into restaurants and that kind of thing. But even on kind of a paid level, where, you know, localizing their campaigns, it does wonders for return on ad spend. Obviously, but like saying, personalizing and localizing it, you know, when we've done campaigns in the past, rather than doing, you know, one big campaign to the whole of London, tailoring the captions, tailoring the copy and the graphics to kind of localize it to say, hi Greenwich, hi Bromley, we're doing this and that. It kind of adds that element of kind of shopping local in a way, and it adds that kind of, you know, personality to it, not only just by saying, you know, dear Mark, this email's for you, but adding that kind of geographical data helps kind of personalize it as well.
It comes exactly back to that, making the small big and the big small, doesn't it? Any final thoughts, Danilo, from you on, you know, are we in danger of making this industry just robotic and lacking in soul and empathy? Is it possible?
It's a risk, but I don't think we are going towards that direction. I think this is an industry that, yes, is based on human interaction. So there are operators or people who might get scared about thinking of scanning QR codes, or we were chatting earlier about will in the future be served by robots. I don't think we will ever get there, because otherwise this industry will lose its soul. But even more so to provide, even with the technology and with the interaction which becomes more automated or more technology based, is still very important, going back to the topic of the panel, to focus on the data and to own the data, because you can still deliver that really personalized experience. So someone might say it's a risk, but I don't think we will ever move to an industry or to a situation where the human interaction will not be at the core and at the base of everything we do. And through the data, you can ensure, owning the data, you can ensure as an operator that will never happen.
So the message is, don't be scared of the data. I'm conscious that we're really running out of time now, but just one last thought from you. What do you know, Hannah, now that you didn't know 2 years ago?
About data, I guess the rate and the acceleration that people are happy to now adopt it and to take it forwards, I think. It surprised me. Just in all, I mean, we've even got chefs now who are much older and who have now wanting to do Instagram accounts for themselves and feed in, and are sending their prospective interviewee candidates our newsletters and our socials so that they can see what we're doing. That never would have happened before, and it's really surprised me. And I think also sometimes one of our GMs, we put pay at table in one of our restaurants, and he said there was a lady came in and she was in her very late 70s, he thought, and so he started to explain it, and she said, oh, it's all right, I can see there's a QR code, I'd rather pay like this. And I think that's the key thing. It's not assuming that people are one way or the other, especially on age, but just accepting that the world has moved on from the pandemic and that people are much more willing to grasp it, I think.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you so much, Danilo. Thank you all so much for joining us and for staying with us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.